Hi, this is Matt Burns from the University of Missouri, and I'm really excited to have someone here to speak with me. This is Jane Sturgell, who's Director of Special Education with Fraser Public Schools. And Jane's been part of an effort to move some interventions to a remote virtual environment. So she was generous enough to give us a few minutes to kind of explain what they did. So thanks, Jane. Appreciate it.
Sure, yeah. So as Matt said, I am the Director of Special Education in Fraser Public Schools, which is in Metro Detroit. And we started the year off, much like most of our surrounding districts, in a virtual environment, and recognized that we needed to come up with a way to do some class-wide intervention. And our elementary schools are K-6. We're a district of about 5,000 suburban area outside of the Detroit area. So what we were kind of challenged with initially was trying to figure out how to keep high opportunities to respond for our students in a virtual environment without the use of breakout rooms that would be difficult to monitor for our teaching staff and our interventionists. So essentially what we had come up with was a model that gave our teachers a little bit of training on how to do partner reading and paragraph shrinking, and then modified it for more of a whole group virtual environment. In this scenario, our teachers were always the first reader, and then the students would be the second reader in the group. So it was really more of a whole group than a small, typical partner activity that we would do. We wanted to make sure that the students were trained on how to do error corrections. So that was something that we modeled for the teachers, and then they trained the kids. And it was up to the gen ed teachers kind of how this looked in their world. However, we did suggest that they spend about 10 to 15 minutes a day of their asynchronous small group or large group time, depending on the teacher. And the teacher, again, was always reader one, and they could do a popcorn style where they rotated the second reader in the class, or some of them chose to do one student for that whole 10, 15-minute block. We kind of let that be up to them. Some teachers actually wanted to use the chat feature and have that error correction done, so it's a little bit more interactive. We had a few teachers want to utilize something like an exit ticket as well for that, so that they could make sure all the students were engaged, even if they perhaps didn't have their camera on during that lesson. So one of the things in our district, we do not require the students' cameras to be on during the asynchronous lesson. They have to have it on just to show they're there, but then they can turn it off. And as part of the training piece, because we're all virtual, so we didn't have an opportunity to bring our teachers together for training. So we had a recorded slide deck with narration, and then they would pause throughout the video to answer questions in a Padlet. And some of those questions would be things like, where might you find text? And so some teachers were going to use science or social studies material. Some teachers wanted to use their big books. We did this with grades 2 through 6. And the teachers had lots of other suggestions too. Scholastic News, ReadWorks, Epic, Mayan, I mean, you name it, they came up with sources of text. We just asked that it be high interest and developmentally appropriate. We weren't necessarily as concerned about the reading level, because the teacher was always going to be the reader, and we knew that they would have an opportunity to increase the vocabulary of their students regardless of their actual independent or instructional reading level. For our younger students and some of our classes that maybe had lower readers, some of the teachers wanted to kind of scale that down. For our upper L students, some of the teachers wanted to consider having the paragraph shrinking done with a writing, so the students had to summarize that paragraph in a sentence that they wrote. And again, they could use the chat feature, exit tickets, or even just a piece of paper and that they held up. And that's kind of how we did it. Even some of our more tech savvy teachers were looking into how to generalize this through a blog with Seesaw or Flipgrid. So lots of creative ways that we've been trying to modify for our virtual environment.
So the advantage of this way, which makes it work, what I heard you say, is if you've got 20 or 25 students, and say 10 general reading levels, you could do 10 groups or 5 groups and group them up that way, instead of having 12 to 13 groups.
Right.
So it could be 1 on 3, 1 on 4, 1 on 5. And it's 1 on 5. The teacher would read first, and then the students would take turns reading after that, either randomly or everybody read.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. That sounds great. And how did the teachers like it? How did they respond?
Some of the teachers really took this and ran with it. Those teachers that seemed to have the most success were teachers that were already familiar with partner reading and paragraph shrinking. So last school year, before the extended closure began, we had piloted this out in a few buildings and a few grade levels just for those teachers that were interested. And those that did take that opportunity at that time seemed to really have a better understanding of how it worked and how they could adapt it for a virtual environment.
Great, cool. Fantastic, thank you. Thanks so much, Jane. Thanks for sharing your
Sure.
experience and for trying new innovative things for kids. Appreciate
Yep.
it. Thank you.